I know. I'm like, should I just go buy DreadPirateKK now? Just be super dramatic and crazy and ridiculous.
I love that. Yeah. Having only one name is so last season. Having nobody ever know what your name actually is is very now. There's like 4 me's going along right now, and I'm just rolling with it.
A galactic fur of KKs
invites you to Space Cats Happy Hour.
Let your mind relax. We meet in a dimension outside of time,
where the playfully curious thrive.
So go on, fill your tin cup chalice with the sacred elixir of creativity. Laugh till you breathe violet flame at the game's absurdity. And above all, let out your full-throated song with us.
Here at Space Cats Happy Hour, with the galactic fur of KKs.
Oh, do you have a thing, or do you want me to?
I can do it. All right. Welcome to Space Cats Happy Hour podcast. I am Zadikat, and I'm here with KK,
Yay!
formerly known as American KK. So we just got back, but we got back from a trip. I was on a longer trip, about 5 weeks, and then KK met up with me for a week of it in Mexico, which was absolutely mind-blowing, and so much stuff happened, and we're definitely going to get into it. But first, I got to talk about, I got to blow out some downloads that came in. That sounds gross.
Considering the amount of pooping I've been doing, because apparently I'm eating timelines in my sleep. God damn.
Yes. Pooping is on the, I was going to say on the menu. Pooping is going to be talked about a bit. But yeah, also just this post-trip integration. Holy guacamole. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in, probably ramble a lot. Have you ever had a mild psychotic episode that was incredibly energizing? That's where I'm at right now. By the way, I'm going to get into the symptoms of when I was going through it. It was very quick, and it was, relatively mild. But if I ever start talking about the symptoms, I will give a heads up in case that's triggering to anyone, and you can just fast forward a bit. But okay, so basically traveling for 5.5 weeks, close to 6 weeks. I have like a million things in Sagittarius, and it's my sun sign. Travel is a sweet spot for me that I had lost touch with. I had really lost connection for almost a decade with how empowering travel can be for me. And then I've been reconnecting to it over the past year plus. And I knew that this length of this trip was going to blow some stuff. It was blowing open. And it did, because it was because when I'm traveling, I'm in that kind of a certain flow state where it's everything has to be at a certain baseline of going smoothly and well, because it's just not an option. So for example, me getting sick in a foreign country, really sick, not an option. So it's not going to happen. So I always know when I plan a trip, okay, good. That means the lead up to the trip, there's not going to be anything huge that's going to throw me off because I have to go on this trip. And then during the trip, it's going to be safe. And so sustaining that level of like, everything's going to be okay for that amount of time, because normally it's like I'll travel for like a week or 10 days or 2 weeks max, was like very expansive. Because it was just like, no, we're still going. And it's not to say that things didn't come up around me or things happened, but it was just like I had to stay in my centered place of like, nope, can't spiral. Basically, it's like no time for spiraling out. Got to stay the course. And did I have some qualms about coming back from that trip that I was deeply in denial about what the integration would be like? Yes, it did. So I went to Jupiter, Florida for 3 days. And then I stayed with a friend who lives in Medellin, Colombia for 2.5 weeks, then met KK for a week in Mexico, and then came back. I didn't come back home to Toronto. I went to this magical house sitting opportunity came up, and I was house sitting in this really nice part of Montreal near the water for like 10 days. And that's where some of the integration began to happen. So now I'm going to segue, because this is very connected to downloads that I've been talking about forever about the masculine feminine energy integration. I don't know if people listening around December 2019, January 2019 were also like going through this, but for me and some of my close friends at the time, and I didn't know it at the time, I just thought it was like a me thing, and then I realized afterwards. So I was like experiencing huge waves of like fear and terror and like disassociation and like void stuff, and just feeling like really deep in that space of like depersonalization almost. And my friend was experiencing all this rage, just like really aggressive, like come up really aggressively and all this stuff. I was about like a few months into my awakening at that point, and I was like, what the hell? And then Jessa was talking about at that time how she was seeing that like the divine masculine was going to come online in 2020 and stuff. And also she was seeing a lot of stuff about like a wave, like a lot of men like potentially killing themselves. And she was just seeing like waves of suicide. And it was this like dark side. I don't know if she'd started talking about it at the time in December when I was feeling this, but anyway, it turns out retroactively I realized that I was deep in this phase of like integrating masculine energy, all aspects, dark and light. And that included, so what I would say, so I got some downloads about mental health or cognitive stuff or like psychological categories that we have and like what they are energetically. And one of them was related to like psychopathy, which was basically that psychopathy is like this energy of like extreme nothingness, but an extreme nothingness that isn't like it's like from a dualistic perspective of like feeling separate from everything, feeling that level of separation that is so extreme. And the nothingness that is part of consciousness and part of the universe is like a really precious, beautiful energy, but our human avatars are very triggered by it. And so the download was that like psychopathy can be like people holding that energy, but from like a dualist place that sort of like distorts it and makes them feel profoundly separate from everyone. And it was related to what we call masculine energy. So it's like kind of like a more structured, sort of like rigid a little bit qualities to it. And basically the fear and all the stuff that I was feeling was that shadow side of the masculine, whatever. I'm using shadow and dark, and like darkness can be like extremely nurturing and positive, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into that disclaimer again, but just using the language we have right now.
So exhausting.
So, yes, it's like constantly qualifying every word that comes out of my stupid mouth. So I was like really in it. And at one point I was like, even to the point, because I was having like really urgent suicidal like feelings. And I was like, wait, this isn't me. This isn't me. Finally was like, oh, I think like this is something with the collective going on. I might be like having some collective energy blow through me. Am I gonna stop saying blow through? We'll find out. Make it a drinking game. And then it was also, of course, connected to the wave of fear that people were going to experience with the pandemic, which one of the effects of it was to make people feel very separated and isolated, which is part of that energy. Right. So that's 2020. And of course, the rage and the aggression is also like, I felt like my friend and I were like, we'd like parcel it out. She's like, I'll take rage and aggression. You take like overwhelming fear and terror and like dissociation. Like, cool. And I'm sure like lots of people were also doing their own version of that. And I do think that by going into that energy and processing it, it allowed me and anyone else who was doing it to align ourselves with a version of reality that was like more gentle, where we didn't have to like see that number of like suicides that Jessa had kind of like tapped into as a potential timeline. So I was really in my masculine integration. I was experiencing intense interpersonal things with men in my life, blah, 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 coming to terms, seeing how they were mirroring my own masculinity, yada, yada, yada. Then we get to spring 2021, where it was like there was a lot of like momentum building from all the fluidity and chaos of 2020, where like just things started to get really wacky and psychedelic, and people were like, oh, we're on the cusp of something, and and there was a lot of like forecasts of like things are going to happen. We've talked about this before, I think. And then boom, crash, just this immense fatigue. Meanwhile, that was also people, other spiritual people were talking about how this was like when the feminine energy and the earth energy was going to, divine feminine was going to come online in a big way. And then, so I personally, again, went through a huge cycle of fatigue, exhaustion, like despair, hopelessness that came along with that feminine energy, which is, I always see things cosmically. So it's like the masculine energy of destruction could be like maybe like an explosion happening, and whereas the feminine energy of destruction is like, and they're connected, they're all intertwined, but the feminine energy of destruction is more like a black hole. Anyway, I find that cosmic lens very helpful as well to look at like human behavior as just like mirroring the inherent destructive and creative energies that are in our universe, and they're very neutral. So that black hole energy of like self-destruction, it can present emotionally as hopelessness, despair, just calling in something extra. Instead of like, I'll be the action that's gonna like blow everything up, it's like, I'm gonna suck in whatever is needed to end this cycle and start something new. So that can, you know, in our human avatars, it can be like mental health crisis, or like calling in like physical health crises and stuff, or like with the dinosaurs, calling in a comet to end the species, instead of what we're doing right now with humans, where it's like, oh, are we going to be the ones to actively end our species, which we're not. It's going to be fun. Okay, so that's April 2021. That energy came online in a big way. I felt it. I was exhausted. I had some things that I was like really trying to bring into external reality, and some like miracles that I was working on that just did not happen. And that energy just took a long time. And I know people were feeling it all over the place. 2021, people just got so tired. I mean, the pandemic as well, just the interaction with it. Everybody was, I ain't got nothing else left in me for this. So that was that aspect. Again, when we're bringing on these like divine feminine and masculine, we're not only bringing on their, like we're bringing all of them, which includes destructive and creative potential. I thought that was it for like feminine. I thought it was like, oh yes, despair, hopelessness, you know, we have to be really kind to ourselves. We have to get used to these emotions and see them in a more loving way, and like stop pushing them away from us and embrace them, and have, you know, grief, all those things. But then December 2021, I had my kitty cat had a health crisis, and she went through a really awful physical trauma from it that was very hard to witness. And it made me lose a lot of nights of sleep. I was getting up all the time to look at her, and I require a lot of sleep. Oh, by the way, I did check in with DreadPirateKK at the beginning of this episode to be like, I'm going to be monologuing a lot. I hope you're okay with that for anybody who's like, is the other person on this podcast ever going to get a word in edgewise? Yes, I promise.
Okay.
Okay. Also, this is like a incredibly long backstory to get to the past few days, but it's coming together. I promise you.
I love it. Keep going.
Yes. The lack of sleep. So I require a lot of sleep just to function, and I'm just like really learning a lot about my nervous system, and like that it's like very, very sensitive, and also has like incredibly low tolerance levels for certain things like lack of sleep. So I was spiraling out with that lack of sleep. And again, tapping into some collective stuff, and started to feel those more out of control mood instability. Your thoughts become chaotic and feel dangerous, that kind of stuff that we have the terms for now. We associate with we can call that, like, if it goes really extreme, we call it like a psychotic episode and stuff. And it was also, there was a path, I a lot of things for me I get shown like past life stuff that I'm working through. It revealed a past life where I had been a mother who had an episode of psychosis. It got very dark, and I was able to like finally bring that up during that period and like really feel the grief of it and purge some of the emotions. I was like, oh, it feels like part of my personal journey, yada yada, and that I wasn't really thinking about it as like part of a collective thing. But meanwhile, I was getting all these downloads about 2022 and how like things were going to get really psychedelic again and more fluid in terms of stuff like timeline jumps and stuff. Then cut to coming back from this trip where there had been an ever-present theme of unwellness, physical and mental unwellness, and how I relate to it and how I tend to kind of like push it away, reject, that kind of stuff that we try to put it in a corner. And it kept burbling up. And then I got back, and then there was I had a conversation with somebody that I'm very close to in my life that was very like, it was like showing, basically I went through a conflict with that person, and then the layers of epiphanies that I had, I was like, oh my goodness, yes, I've been projecting a lot of stuff onto this person through their journey and their experience that is actually mirroring back to me my own unresolved issues around physical and like death and decay and physical and mental instability, but especially mood, emotional and mental, psychological instability. And that I had like a lot of old trauma around that stuff and like was still unprocessed. And so then I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to try finally antidepressants to like help with some of my own mood volatility that is cyclical with my menstrual cycle. And hopped on the phone with my doctor, and she was like, made a really good case for it. And like, oh, there's new drugs. They're really low side effects. I was like, sweet, because I've always been really scared of the side effects. Anyway, this is not an antidepressant. I think they're very, very helpful for some people. But I did end up having an incredibly adverse reaction. I was like part of that small percentage where it's like, nope, this is not for you. So I went on it, day 2 of it, woke up in the middle of the night and was like, yeah, here's what I'll just talk heads up about symptoms for maybe like a couple of minutes if you want to fast forward. But I was like, it's like the thing where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to try to think of something calming. And then the calming thing immediately, like in your head, like, it's like, oh, I'll think of a kitten. It's like, oh, you'll think of a kitten getting its head rolled over by a car or something like that. Like, there's no safe thoughts. And I was just, I was very, like, it was like moment to moment, like hanging on to like, okay, do everything you can, dance, move, breathe, whatever tools you have in your arsenal. And it was like basically all through the night and then into the next day of like the freaking thing wearing out of my system. Meanwhile, this is the person who I was like, maybe I'll do ayahuasca during this trip. And then I decided not to. Like, it's too much. Like, I got all these signs from my intuition itself being like, no, that's too intense for your nervous system. Like, you're not. It's like, and then I was like, there was like an opportunity to do LSD. And I was like, I think I'm going to just do the tiniest microdose so that it's like be kind to my nervous system. And then I'm like, aha, these antidepressants. And it was like, no, you actually are going to experience a version of this that is extremely intense. But it was after that of like going through that, and I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh, right, this is the other aspect of this divine feminine energy that is coming online more collectively, is that it's chaos. Like the feminine is chaotic, it's more fluid. And so as we're going to, as a collective, start experiencing things like what we call like timeline jumps or like Mandela effects and stuff like that, just reality like shifting around us in these ways that are much less structured and don't flow through like, this is this is how we linearly, rationally move through time and history together. It's going to be very dysregulating to people's nervous systems, and it's going to require some processing, especially me. I think there are people, including DreadPirateKK, who have a higher tolerance for that just innately, and also especially people who haven't incarnated that much as humans and are like more already connected to that fluid energy.
Oh, that's a good point.
Don't have that issue, but I personally have had so many human lives. So yeah, and you were also explaining to me in terms of my astrology. That was really helpful. But so I had this big epiphany. I was like, oh yes, that is, and it also went along with one of the downloads I had about psychosis, which was that it is more connected to that feminine energy, but it hadn't fully come through that it's because it's connected to that fluidity. It's like you're connecting to the parts of you that don't experience time linearly, that are all over the place, that are literally experiencing themselves in like multiple versions of themselves at the same time. And your human avatar is like, or not, you know, my human avatar is like, and so I had a few, because I had had so many timeline weirdnesses and like really real time quick, like, whoa, we're shifting, that had sort of been like throwing me off. It was triggering this big response from my nervous system. And so that's why going through it, as utterly wretched as it was, I ended up being like, okay, that is what this is like helping me connect with in a deeper way, is that chaotic, unpredictable fluidity that is coming online, and like really just giving me a signal that I need to learn how to embrace it and work with it and stop pushing it into this like danger zone category of like danger. Yeah. Which I think for me, like, I think other people find that masculine energy more triggering. And for me, it's less triggering. For me, that one is like, it's easier for me to see myself in it, and it's just less. It's because there's the illusion of control. It's like, well, you're taking actions, and so whereas this one, it's like the illusion of control is completely taken away, right? So that was my journey of those downloads, and just to bring it back to pooping at the end, one thing that was a gift of this experience as well is that I think it might be the first time that I've been able to really keep any kind of sense of humor during that level of fear. And that, you know, that's so like anything that can get you out of buying into 100% in the reality of the experience is so helpful. So I was like very proud of myself, because I was like, in the night when I woke up, I was like trying to joke with Mike. And then the real trigger for me was when he was going to leave for work and I was going to be all on my own with this feeling. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write down some stuff. So I wrote down, this is hilarious and sexy, because I was going to put bullet points. So I wrote, this experience is hilarious and sexy because I keep pooping.
Yeah, same.
I can't put on clothes because it's too scary.
Oh, yeah.
It's forcing me to combine deep breathing, unfocused gazing, and shuffle dancing. Because I was like, oh, you gotta dance. You always try to dance to get yourself out of it. But I would just like gaze off and like have horrific thoughts while I would kind of like barely move my body. And then I said, it's a great trick to play on myself, you little bastard.
Oh my God. This sounds like me trying to convince myself to have a sense of humor about like anything at all.
It was like anything I could write down at all to just break the spell.
Yeah.
So that was that. So that is
that's powerful.
yeah. And then you have also similarly
Oh my God.
been feeling this wave of anxiety that's not yours.
Yeah.
Because I think things are going to get more fluid and we might start, I think in my head, the collective is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's really helpful to hear you say all that, because I keep forgetting that we're macros and that we're going to feel this stuff before it actually hits. And I love how you said that by processing it, we make the timeline, or at least align with the timeline where it ends up being gentler on everyone. And so that gave me a lot of peace, because I was like, oh, okay, the work that I'm doing is not completely, like, the amount of not pain, but like the craziness that is this work and the amount of like nausea and anxiety and fucking being laid out in the couches, like, that is not for nothing. It literally is helping create or alignment with the timelines that are easier on everyone in that way. And because I've just been feeling like I don't know, I've been going through a sandstorm, like I can't do anything but like just take what I assume is one step in front of the other in the right direction, because I can't fucking see, I can't do shit. And I'm just like, I'm hanging on by my fingernails for the past 2 years, really. But like, that's the conscious part of it. Before that, I felt like I was I mean, I can talk about that the dark masculine nothingness of wanting to not exist anymore, combined with the dark feminine of like calling in the black hole of like, let's destroy the old timeline in whatever way works, including like psychopathy and bad mental health, all the stuff. It's just, anyway, so it helped me hear that we were aligning with a higher timeline just by doing this work and allowing it to pass through, because I can feel the anxiety and it's not mine. Like, it is triggering me to become anxious about personalized things like my upcoming move and all the packing that I do. Like, it will trigger me to be anxious about that, but I know that it's not mine, because I'm not normally anxious about that kind of stuff. I know it's going to be okay. Like, I know the real me is safe and supported and loved, and I don't need to be anxious. And I've gotten rid of a lot of that anxiety to such an extent that I feel really good. And so when the anxiety comes back, I'm like, what is going through the grid right now? Because it is not, it's not mine, but it really feels like mine, because it'll trigger me to be anxious about things that are in my life. So
yeah. I think you're right. I think it's a combination of like creating and aligning with. For me personally, it is helpful to be presented with those ways of looking at mental health and cognitive stuff. But it's, I just want to be clear, because like the antidepressant didn't work out for me, but like it's not to say that anyone's like physical journey with how they treat their mental health is like invalid in any way. Everybody got to do what everybody got to do. I do think it's interesting, because for me it's very cyclical with my period and PMS, and I do think it's interesting that it's like kind of the PMS is an opportunity, if you're like me, kind of constantly shoving certain emotions down, or not really engaging with them, or like really judging them, or having an aversion to them. Then it'll like, you do that throughout the month, and then it just builds up and builds up, and then it's like, well, no, in the PMS you're actually gonna engage with these in some way,
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking at, it's been helpful. And I had a really helpful session with you, incredibly helpful, which was like, basically like, if I ask myself, what do I need to do? It was like, you need to like sit with these emotions more and like give them more space and stuff. So I've been, we had a session where we did that. And it was so helpful.
That was powerful stuff. You released a lot, man. That dream, woo boy.
Oh yeah, I had a dream where I was bleeding out, and then it was almost like my water broke, like it was like this huge gush, and I released this plastic bag full of clear liquid into the toilet.
Yeah,
that is TMI.
Not only are dreams crazy, but talking about real life poop fiasco. Although it's not really a fiasco, because I'm fine and I'm in my apartment or whatever. But like, when I woke up this morning, I was like, get out of bed now, please. just time to go. And that is not normal for me at all. So like,
Oh, actually, that reminds me, kind of a weird segue into our trip to Mexico, but we did spend a day sharing our like poop horror stories with each other. But I never got to share the funniest one.
okay.
Which I'm gonna share. Okay. When I was like 20, I went to Burning Man and I went with one of my best friends, and she had this friend who was about 10 years older who had been going, like this was like very early 2000, like 2002. And her friend was like 10 years older and had been going since the 90s. So it was like still relatively early. And her friend lived in Sonoma with her boyfriend. And so we went with them, and then we were like staying at their place in Sonoma for a while. And they were, as you can imagine, people who go to, they were unconventional. So they had a little bungalow, and the kitchen was like the bathroom, like faced right onto the kitchen. There was like a little space, but like basically, yeah, that was where the bathroom was. And instead of a door, they had a bead curtain.
Oh.
And so we ended up spending like, I think at least 3 weeks or more there. So like, you're like living with these people with their one bathroom, which has a bead curtain that faces like right into the gate. It's like where the traffic was too. It was like, if you were walking from the bedroom to the front door, you're passing that. It's this like very highly central trafficked place.
Not my idea of a good time.
Yeah. And so I very not my idea of a good time. And it was kind of a little bit, I felt like it was a little bit like just presented like, well, like this is how we do it. Like, just get used to it. Like, there was no like, oh, you might find this uncomfortable. Like, we understand there might be an adjustment period or whatever. Like, you might find this. And it was just like, meh. So, obviously pooping became like a real stressor for me.
Yeah.
And they had a party.
Oh no.
And so the whole house was filled with people. And okay, so they lived like outside of town, but not that far outside. So like they had like a little property, but like there were, like you could see the houses on the other side of the street and like nearby. And it was like a traffic street, a lot of, cars driving in the front yard and stuff. Okay. So yeah, party. And then one of those blasted nighttime poops came up. It's like, no, not now. So like literally the house is just like the kitchen is full of people.
Oh, no.
So I was like, hey, and I can't drive or anything. So I can't like go to like but even like also like getting somewhere, it would have been like a while to get to somewhere where you could have.
Yeah.
So I was really desperate. So everybody was inside the house or in the backyard, but like no one was in the front yard. So I pooped under a tree.
Oh, nice.
Yard. But it was like very exposed. It was like, anyway.
That's
and then I was like trying to bury it. All I had was a little stick that I found. So I was like doing my best.
Sorry, yeah.
Like what are you supposed to do? Right? What are you supposed to do? The options are limited. Anyway, then the next morning they have this dog. The dog immediately, the terrible job of wearing it I did. The dog immediately digs it up, and it's obvious. It's not like it's like obvious a human did it. Anyway, but then they were just like, "Oh my god, what?" And then I was like, "What?" Like I just went along. I was like, "Damn, your friends are wild." In the front yard.
Oh my god. Oh, I can't. I cannot. I don't know. I would have. I don't know where. I don't know. I could not have dealt with that. You are a hero. I can't.
It was upsetting. I was not pleased about it. Also, it totally connects back because while I was distracted, so I was like doing everything I could to distract myself yesterday. So I was just watching funny videos online. But one of them referenced this story from a few years ago. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, that story. And it was the story. Okay, if you don't like poop talk, I don't know. Sorry, listen to another podcast because this is all poop talk. But it was like the story of this guy. They were in England, and they went on their first Tinder date, and then they went out together, and then they went back to the guy's place, young couple, like early 20s, and then the girl had to go to the bathroom, and then she like clogged the toilet, and so then she fished the poop out and like wrapped it up, and then tried to throw it out the window, but the window was like, it was like two windows like separated by a foot of space or something, like double glazed in that way, and so it fell into the void in the middle.
Oh fuck.
And then she went out and told the guy
oh no
what had happened.
Oh
and
no.
In their apartment building, and it was like stuck there, and then she's like, I think I can get it out.
Oh no.
And then she climbed up, and she was like reaching down, but it was like really far down, but because she was like a bit of a gymnast, she's like, I think I can do this. So she put her head and shoulders in like upside down to get it, and then she got stuck.
Oh god.
And he had to call the fire brigade to get her out.
A nightmare. God.
So that for that reason, it became like a news story that then went viral and stuff.
Oh my
And
God.
there's like a photo of her like pressed between the glass, like upside down.
Oh.
Anyway, it was a very strong message. It was like, look, instead of like dealing with this shit, you tried to like throw it away, and then you got stuck in it. Literally. Was the message.
Oh yeah, we've all fucking been there. Even if we haven't done exactly that, we have gotten lost in the shit, metaphorically or otherwise, and it's just a part of our human existence right now. And
it was really funny too, because the young guy, they like interviewed him. I guess they interviewed him like on the scene at the time. And they were like, oh, are you going to keep seeing her? And he was like, well, I'm very busy with my dissertation right now, but she is a lovely girl. But then it was like the video accompanied an article where I guess they maybe went back later and like asked him again. And he was like, oh, we've already been out on another date. And like, who knows? But like, and I thought that was nice. But it was just like on the scene, he was like keeping his options. I'm like,
I mean, sure. Once you've been through that, there's not much else that's really going to throw you. Like, talk about a pretty solid start to your foundation if you can get past that. Like,
solid.
I know, right? That's, yeah. As soon as I said it, I was like, here we go.
Maybe we can, like, hopefully leave. Okay, well, that'll be the poop talk segment of the entire first half of blowing it out and lots of poop talk. Anything you want to say about our time in Mexico?
I mean, that trip was fucking wild. It was just, I mean, talk about a huge reset for at least me. I'm assuming you as well, because you've done all this traveling. But like for me, just being on that 1 week portion of it, I came back and I thought, I just felt like an entirely new person. Like I'd retrieved a part of my soul or something. I don't know. It was just a very transformative trip. And I know a lot of that was not only just being conscious while doing this sort of sacred site traveling, and honestly, every part on earth is sacred. It's not like there's a certain point in Mexico where it was just a sacred work, but like I could feel the extra emphasis of the energy in like the volcano, for example, where I was like, oh, this is something extra. But it just felt like I'd cleared out a lot of stuck energy, and not just from myself, but from the earth, because we kept having these days where we would walk for like 9 hours or whatever. It was just so long, and it was the trickster energy, like the the GPS wasn't working, or we thought it was, anyway, all this stuff. But it was also to get us to go to these places of the grid that we might not necessarily have gone to, just like going straight to our destination or whatever. And so, you were the one that said that mostly, so I'm kind of stealing from you anyway, but like it made sense. It was just like we were meant to walk around, our energy fields were supposed to clear out whatever. And I think Mexico is a really powerful place, especially right now. It feels like the North American continent as well as Mexico. And I know that, I mean, again, stuff is going on everywhere, but like that trip just felt so energetically cleansing or empowering. Like I can't even think of all the words yet, but just shit happened there that was I don't know, it helped me wake up and be like, this is what I want to do more of in my life. And it really, I think that there's a reason I ended up putting in my notice at work earlier than I was really thinking about doing, because it was just so painfully obvious what was out of alignment in my life coming back from what was aligned, which was traveling and being with people I like, and, you know, not doing shit I didn't want to do, like that kind of stuff. And it was just like, you've got to get this, you've got to unhook your energy from this old matrix of stuff that is, it's just no longer in alignment. It was at one time, and I'm not judging my time spent in the matrix, because I think it was just a part of the game, and I can get frustrated about it, or I can be like, that served a larger purpose and all that other stuff. But like, I'm not in that anymore. And the longer I was holding on to, like, I don't know, just being in that old place with the old energy and the old people, it was just like, I can't do this. So I even had second thoughts about putting in my notice, you know, for a long time. Even before I was doing this, I was like, maybe I should just work through the winter. Like, I don't know. And it was very clear to me that I couldn't do that. Like, I just can't do that. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do to make money, but I don't know that I need to worry about it. I think that the universe is coming up with shit for me, and I just needed to release what I was hanging on to out of safety and security, even though it was poison, you know, at this point. So I don't know, I'm at a new place of calm about it, but yet I'm also going into a very, what the old me would call an unstable time, because I'm used to the linear, you know, the matrix has its container, and it was a very comforting container.
Yeah.
And now I'm going into something totally new, and I'm like, fuck. And I'm not worried about it, but like, there is a part of me, like, I still have the ghost programs of like, are you sure you're going to be okay? Like, all the old stuff, you know, how are you going to take care of yourself? All that crap. But I'm mostly okay. And I think some of this anxiety that's coming out right now around that is like, yes, old programming stuff, but it's meant to trigger me to say, are you sure that you want to go into this new grid, new earth type age, or do you want to fall back into your old patterns again? And there's no judgment either way from the universe. It's just like, these are the triggers that are like, do you want to push past it, or do you want to fall back and kind of stay safe for a while? And there's nothing wrong with doing either of those things, but the trip for me really just reset me into I just felt like I'd been cleaned out of all the insecurities and directionlessness and all that stuff. So even though I don't necessarily have a direction now, I still feel more solid, even though I have no idea what's happening. I don't even know if that makes any sense at all, but that's
totally makes sense. You're doing a big leap into the unknown right now. So yeah, it makes sense that it's a lot of stuff that would come up. And
it was like it was one of my favorite trips I've ever been on. Like, it was so, I don't know.
I love a week, but it felt way more than a week. It was definitely the most supercharged part of my trip, because every day we were doing so much walking around. Like, we were doing like 5-6 hours of walking every single day. And because it was so condensed, like, there was not a lot of downtime. So it was like, we were in Mexico City for 3 days. And the first day we walked all around. It was like, I looked up, we wanted to go to this Frida Khalo museum that was in a different neighborhood. And I looked up, and then there was like this person online had been like, if you want to walk from this neighborhood to that neighborhood where the Frida Khalo museum was, like, do this route that's like much more zigzaggy, and you'll get a really good like feel of city. So it had like plotted it out exactly for us. And we just followed that route. And it took us through so many incredible neighborhoods and like all these parks. It took us to this park where we were like, what is up with all these? It's so strange, like the way the trees are like set up, and they were like in lines, and like the types of trees. And then anyway, you started to twig to it. You're like, what are all these like little potted plants with like trees growing out of them and stuff? And it turned out to be a tree nursery where like they grew trees for like most of the city. Anyway, when I looked it up online and found that out, I started crying. It moved me so much. I was like, oh my God, a place for trees to be born. And it had these 2 massive eucalyptus trees, and where that one of them was set up as a shrine for like going to ask for like healing. And I put my hand on the trunk of the other tree, and like so much emotion came into me from that tree. I just felt like overwhelmed with emotion. And there was a little, like, there were these parts of that park that had like statues in it, including this little alien cat ambassador statue, 100%. And also that cat showed up on a poster later on, but it was like, it wasn't the stone statue. It was like a little pink futuristic cat. But I'm like, you're the same cat. So yeah. And then we went on a day trip to these pyramids, which again, with the masculine feminine integration of the pyramids, it was a sun pyramid and the moon pyramid. And that was incredible. And they had like with the whole Lionsgate, there was so much cat energy because it was like leading up to the Lionsgate 8-8 portal. And there was only one piece of art, and it was this like painting on this tiled wall of this, they called it the Puma mural. And again, that was like radiating a lot of energy. And you got a lot of energy off of
the stones.
Volcano.
Yeah.
The stones.
Yeah.
And then we were like, this is too overstimulating because it was a tourist area.
Oh. Loud.
And so there were a lot of people selling things and people blowing these whistles and stuff. So we were like, this is too overstimulating. And then it was like, oh, look over there. Like, I just felt like everything was like rearranging itself for us. Like, it was like, you can also do this nature walk trail behind the pyramid where you're just walking around in this cactus tree area. It was like so calm and welcoming. And we just walked around there. It was like, this is really good.
Exactly. There was like nobody out there. It felt a lot calmer. And also it rained just about every day we were there. I'm pretty sure it might not have rained the first couple of days we were in Mexico City, but like once we went to the pyramid, or I keep saying fucking pyramid, the temple or whatever the fuck it was. Words are not working. It was both. Once we went there, like we were just leaving and waiting for the bus back, and it started to rain. And I was like, we helped release something, not just for the earth, but for ourselves too. Oh my God, eating that mango by the side of the road. Oh my God. And what was the fruit you had?
Prickly pears, my new favorite fruit.
Prickly pear. Yeah, those were delicious. It was just like so incredible. Anyway, yeah, that was I definitely kept getting transmissions of energy through my spine, through like rocks. So like I sat with my back against the moon temple, I think, and just felt like stuff. It was so peaceful. And then when we went to the volcano, I know I'm not going in order, like I'm just jumping around because that's what I fucking do. But the volcano, a couple days later, I sat again with my back against a big boulder, and I just felt stuff coming through there too. It wasn't anything specific that I can really, translate right now, but I just knew that there was a consciousness. It was very calm and peaceful and powerful, but it was just like, I didn't feel any urgency like I have been feeling the past few years of like, okay, so I get this transmission, I got to figure it out, the download. It was just, no, just let it seep in and you're going to figure it out as it's meant to come through. Anyway.
Yeah, because, okay, so when I planned the trip, I talked to this one friend who had been to Mexico a lot, and he just threw out a lot of names of places. And so I knew I wanted to be in Mexico City, but then I also I knew I wanted to visit the Teotihuacan pyramid temples, which were like an hour outside. That was just a day trip. But then I also knew I wanted to go somewhere else as well. And he had said this place, Toluca, and he was like, it's supposed to be beautiful. And then when I looked it up online, it said, oh, there's a lagoon there. And also it said there's this architectural feature called Los Portales. I was like, oh my God, the portals, we've got to go to the portals, And I was like, lagoon, perfect. But I didn't realize, so Toluca, and also there was an altitude thing. So I live at 0 altitude. I've never done any altitude stuff. First I was in Colombia, which was at a higher altitude, and then Mexico City, which is even higher. And then when we went to Toluca, I was like, oh shit, this is even higher. So I was dealing with a lot of like altitude fatigue. But because the trip was so jam-packed, I wasn't like doing a lot of like prep before we go. So I just thought we were going to this lagoon. And then I was looking up like right before, the day before, like, how do we get there? Okay. Turns out you need to hire a driver to like take you there. And then I saw, like, when I first looked it up, there was like a TripAdvisor about it, but it only had 2 comments. And one of the comments was, make sure you also secure your ride back in advance because it can be tricky out there. There's not like cellular data and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, okay, so we found through our host guy who's going to drive us, wait with us there, and then take us back. It's like, that's great. So then we go to bed the night before we're going to go to what I think is a lagoon. I wake up in the middle of the night and the driver had sent a text after I'd gone to sleep at like 10 p.m. and he was like, oh, you know, the roads near the area are quite rough. So actually the price is going to be different. And I was like, let me look this up again. So now when I look, the TripAdvisor has like a million comments that were there before, and they're all about how it's actually a volcano and it's this very high altitude. I was like, what? It was 15,000 feet altitude. I was like, I'm like in the middle of it. I was just like, I'm doing what tomorrow? And they're like, and the heights, like, you know, you got to be prepared because it's like at that altitude, you have to move. So I was like, we have to do I was just like, okay. So it's like, okay, this is actually going to be really fucking epic.
And it was.
And it was. And so we get there. And so our driver was so lovely and sweet. He can't, he's not allowed to like drive all the way up these like really crazy rough roads. You have to stop at the parking lot area, and then you take these little mini cab trucks, like pickup trucks, where you sit in the back and they really herd you in like cattle. And then you go up and they drive and drive and drive and drive. And then you get close to the summit. And then what you're doing is you're around the perimeter of the crater of the volcano. And then you like walk on trails that go like up and down. And there's two lagoons, again, moon and sun. Integration theme is just relentless, on the nose, as my things always are. Yeah, you walk up and down, and it was just like the most spectacular. Like, these are things, I'm not like an avid hiker or anything. I'm not very rugged. I had already done something in Colombia that was like so beyond for me. It was incredible too. But this was, I was just like, oh my God. So I'm like gasping my way along. Meanwhile, as I found out when I was doing all that frantic online research, where I was like, holy shit, another name for the place we were going was called Mountain of the Bats, and you're like so bad energy, so you're like getting supercharged from this volcano, and I'm like barely able to move. Like a lot of people who were like first time hikers, like you have to move so slowly, and I'm like gasping and panting, and you're just like walking around all fine. And then we go down, so we had to choose. We couldn't do both lagoons because it was just too much walking. So we're like, we're going to go down to the Sun Lagoon this time. We spent more time with the Moon Pyramid, but we went to the Sun Lagoon, and we walked down to it, and the water is like crystal clear, beautiful. And then we met up with these other hiking group who were so nice and friendly, and we were having a bit of like scotch with them. They invited us over, and then this woman starts to talk about the mythology and the folklore of the area. It's like about the mermaid in the lagoon, and I was like, oh shit, because I had done this healing session. I think I talked about it on the podcast way back at the beginning of the year, that came to me, which was like the island of 1,000 years of healing. But on that island, there's a lagoon, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then it was like, oh yeah, it's a lagoon that's the result of a volcano. And the beings that I saw in that lagoon, like it was a healing for feminine energy, basically. And so the feminine entities that I saw, they looked, when they were frolicking around at the end of the 1,000 years together in community, they looked like merfolk to me. And there was like a whole Mintaka planet sink of like underwater stuff. And so I was like, oh my God, we were literally at the lagoon. Even as I was saying it just now, I was like, there was also a cave on the island. And the other thing that I did in Colombia was like go through this cave. Anyway, so it was like,
right.
It was like, you are going to physically 3D go through the healing.
Well, no wonder our session during that, like you released so much blood and like had that quote unquote, not pregnancy, but like your water broke and like you released this plastic bag full of whatever in your dream, you know, like that is a huge, like talk about feminine healing for 1,000 years. Like what you just released 1,000 years of, you know, healing, you know, that's.
Yeah. I just, as I'm like saying it now, more layers are, I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. Right. That I was like, would come back and do this big feminine energy integration with myself, because that's so interesting too. Now I'm like, because I did it energetically in that session. First, that session came to me just spontaneously, where an aspect of myself showed up, and I just went through it. I was like, go with it. And she was just showing me the island. And then I did it with just KK and another person. And then I did it with a broader group, and it like really fleshed itself out into this place. But that is so crazy that like you do it energetically, and then you're just like know you'll get the experience to do this physically as well, like
Oh.
in community with another friend, with you know. And like my other thing too was like, there was another friend that I went through the cave with, which is like a whole big part of the island. It starts off in isolation, and then it moves over the first 250 years, and then the first 750 years are spent in isolation, and then the last 250 is like coming together and healing collectively. So
Such a good healing session. That did a lot for me too. But
then I had taken this video while it was there,
oh wow.
where this guy, the guy that was like the tour guide for that friendly group of people that we ended up hanging out with a bit, he was talking to me while I was taking a video close to like halfway down the hill towards the lagoons. Then when I watched it back, because I took a million videos, but then I was starting to watch them back, and that one, it's like you hear him ask, like, do you speak Spanish, in Spanish? And then you hear me answer, it's like, my voice sounds like I'm like kind of like passing out. And then it's just like direct transmission from the volcano of these crazy sounds that are actually like, it sounds like a prehistoric wild cat. It's like, wow, like crazy.
And a heartbeat too.
And a heartbeat. It's like being stopped. Like you hear the footsteps, you hear the growls, and like this very slow heartbeat, and it just goes on and on. Crazy trickster energy. Oh yeah, and then so the trickster energy. So our mountain climb in Toluca. Want to get into that?
Oh yeah, talk about crazy timeline hopping and being on different timelines and the feeling unstable and that weird feminine energy where it's just not linear. Let's get into that. Yeah.
So in Toluca, which is a smaller city, every time we were like taking walks, it was, which again, I wasn't expecting with Mexico City, just to go back to Mexico City, how much beautiful green space there is there. But we were always trying to make sure we got in some like nature time in our walks. So we were walking around the city of Toluca, and then when I looked on Google Maps, it was like, oh yeah, there's like, if you walk in this direction, there's a nice green area. It looked like a park. And so then we started walking towards it, and it was all uphill, uphill, uphill. And then you got to a part where you got to the green, but it was kind of like, it was just kind of more wild and like not as structured as like some parks are. And there were trails where you could walk up, but it was all, it was just a bit more like wilderness space. And it's kind of a hill, but it was kind of a small mountain. I don't even know what to call it. And so we were walking, and it was raining lightly. And so we were making our way up. So if I haven't already told this story on the podcast about like the trip to San Francisco back last year that echoed this incident in my life when I was 17, where I was climbing up a mountain with two of my friends, including one of my best friends who's still a close friend of mine, very, very close. And I got stuck like very close to the summit. It was the mountain in Montreal. It was like the Mount Royal. Normally you go up around, circle around and pass to get to the top, but we just decided it was like early spring, and we decided to just go straight up, and we didn't have like any good grips on our shoes, and it was all slushy and icy. And so we got to a point where I couldn't make it any further. It was very close to the summit, but my two friends had gotten all the way to the summit, and they were like looking down at me, and I started to have a panic attack and fear of heights kind of stuff set in. And then one of my friends reached over with her scarf, like she was like, maybe I can like help pull you up. And then she fell super far, like at least 40 to 50 feet. And like I saw her hit some rocks like a rag doll. And I thought she had died. And like my other friend and I were like screaming at the top of our lungs. And then we ended up on the timeline where she had like miraculously like turned it into like a somersault cartwheel, falling down a mountain, hitting anyway, and she just like cartwheeled. It's like the craziest thing that doesn't make any sense because it wasn't linear. And she was okay. She just ended up with like a bunch of like gouges on her legs and stuff, and she was fine. And then these two she like rolled out of it like super far down the mountain. And then these two guys who were hiking were like, ran past her because they'd heard me screaming, and they were like, they're like, quick to the person who's screaming. And then I had to be rescued, and it was like a huge blockage and trauma in my life. Anyway, cut to, we're climbing up this mountain where it's at a high altitude. I'm getting very tired. we get close to what look like you can see from our vantage point, like the summit, whatever peak of the hill. And there's like some rocks jutting out, and you can see, and we sit down there. And then you, DreadPirateKK, had this hunch, and you were like, oh, I'm going to go. I want to see what's on top. I have a feeling it's something interesting. And I was like, I am fucking gasping already. I'm just going to stay here. Plus, it was like a little slippy. So I think I wasn't tapping into that other mountain thing, but like subconsciously I was starting to tap into like, be careful, like slippery mountain, ahoy. And then do you want to tell your part?
Yeah, so I go up to the top, and I was actually again running up this fucking mountain. I am not athletic. Like I hike and sort of not for anyway. My point is there was no reason for me to feel like running, and I was just like energized up this mountain, and I don't know where it came from, but I was just like going so fast up, and it wasn't super far to the top, but it was definitely some effort to get there. And when I got to the top, I knew it. I was like, it felt so good. And there was like an archaeology dig. To this day, I don't know quite what it was. There was no sign or anything like, this is a, certain period in history. And I don't remember any information being there at all. There might've been, but I didn't see any, just this random archaeology dig. And archaeology has been really big for months now because of.
Can you actually I think it might be even differenter. Because you keep saying that, and that's not really what I would have described when I got to the top. So can you describe it physically more, what you saw?
Yeah. So it was just this random, I don't know, 10 feet wide, possibly, like in total. It was like, it clearly had like little tiny wooden stakes and like string attached to the stakes to like, map out the actual dig. So it looked like an archaeology dig to me. And there were no tools or anything. Again, it was just like this official looking archaeology dig that was very small. And I don't know what it was supposed to be. There was no like artifacts or anything like that. It was literally just like muddy, having like very shallow dig. And to the left of me, there was a couple sitting on this rock, and they were in their little ponchos because again it was lightly raining, and they were just quietly talking. And then I saw this really amazing view. Sort of, we'd gone up one side of the mountain, and then you could go down this other side. Anyway, I didn't go down it, but I was looking at the valley below, and it was just so beautiful, and like the clouds. Anyway, so but because there was this archaeology,
you could go down.
I think so. Oh my God, am I not remembering right?
No, I think this is because we're
on separate timelines.
Completely different experiences of this mountain. So I think we're just like, it's only hitting in now just how different it was.
How different it is. Yeah. So you could go down. I mean, it was kind of like coming up, like there was no official trail, but like they're kind of, anyway, it doesn't matter. So I was just like quietly standing with the earth. I had texted you like, oh, wow, look at this archaeology thing. And I had my phone with me. Like I didn't put it back in my bag. I had it in my hand, not really expecting you to come up, but like just having my phone in my hand, whatever. And I was like, okay, I don't want to take too long. So I want to get back to Zadikat. So I just kind of like took in the view a little bit and like turned around and started to go back down the exact way I came, which is there's only really one way to go to get back to you. And by the time I got back to where I was pretty sure I left you, you were not there. And I was like, did I go down the wrong, like what happened? And then I looked at my phone again, and you had called me and texted me that you were coming up. And I was like, what the shit? So I called you back really fast, and I'll let you.
Yeah. So for me, basically I was sitting there and you just booted it up. And again, it was really not far. You should have been able to, like, once you got to the top, like poke your head over and be like, hi. That's how close it was. Like you should have been able. So you go up, and then I get a text from you that says, oh, like there's like an archaeology dig up here, LMAO. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, well, I'm going to go. I'm not going to miss that. So I followed the exact trail that you followed. Like I was maximum 2 minutes of walk. Right? Like it was so close. I see this huge tree, and because the path wasn't like that clear, I was like, okay, that's a good tree. That's my marker. And then I get to the top. So we're talking about the space of like maybe maximum 2 houses could have been at the top. this tiny summit where we are. There's no sign of you anywhere. There's nothing.
And you
And
didn't
then
see people either.
I didn't see, and there was no couple. There was nobody up there at all. This all happened in the span of like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's nobody up there. It's just desolate. I don't see anything that looks like an archaeology. I was like, oh, maybe you meant this. Like I saw this like stone.
Whoa.
Like you said, it was like deep though. And it was like a weird thing that you could go in. So I looked in that to see if you like jumped in or something. But it was just like a pit with like a rectangular stone around it. I just assumed in the moment that that's what you meant by an archaeology dig. But mostly I was just focused on like, where are you? Because I had texted I'm coming up, and then from that point on, I didn't hear you. So I get to the top, and then I'm looking. I don't see you anywhere, and you could pretty much see everything. There's just one part where it was like a bit of a cliff face, so I like walked around that. For me, there's no other way to get down because it gets like sheer cliff. So I'm just looking out, and I'm like, where the fuck is this person? Like, you just left me. You just texted me. I'd phone you, no answer. That's when I start to panic. So I'm starting to shout. I'm shouting KKKK. And at first, it took me a while to get like my full lung strength back. But like you could have heard me shout if you were within a mile. By the end of it, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and I have a very loud scream. I'm screaming over and over again, KKKK, because I started to have a complete panic attack because the only linear, logical way my mind, even though I was like, I think something's going on. We had been dealing with so much trickster energy. I was like, my brain couldn't handle it. So I was like, they must have fallen and hit their head. What the fuck is going on? Literally screaming at the top of the mountain, at the top of my lungs, like anyone within a mile radius heard this person like screaming like a lunatic.
I didn't
have done the whole perimeter of this tiny area. You're nowhere to be found. And then you called me, and I had like a breakdown on the floor. I was like, and I was like sobbing. And I came back down, and then you were even further down than I expected. And then we like finally met up. But then also you hadn't seen that like huge tree, which I was like, I know this tree is like an important marker. So just completely, totally, utterly different timelines, same place and time, and not able on my end to reach you. You were thankfully able to reach me because like none of my stuff was
wild
going through to you in the moment.
Yeah.
And then thankfully, we got back together. And then from that point on, I was like sticking so close to you. I was like, no, we are not splitting timelines again. That was too much. And I brought up a bunch of old baggage for me. So I had like a full meltdown. I was just like,
you definitely, I think you had to revisit that for whatever cycle you were closing. And it was way too similar to what you'd already been through, and it was so weird because like normally I don't go off by myself. Like that was not a thing that I typically would do, and I was like, what am I doing? It just felt like, not that I was out of control, like not anything like that. It just felt like there was something.
I've had that feeling before where you do feel out of control because you're enacting someone else's projection onto you. You're not acting the way you would normally act.
Maybe.
Like, and it's like they need you to mirror something for them. So I've had that happen. At least that's how it feels to me, what you're describing. It's like that's happened to me where afterwards you're like, that's not how I said something that I would not normally say, or I was like weirdly defensive in a way or aggressive in a way that I would not normally be.
Yeah.
But it's like, it just overtakes, and it's like, okay, because they need you to play that role.
Needed to be on different timeline. It was pretty wild. Like I wasn't super happy about it, but like I was more upset. I mean, I can be pretty chill about timeline weirdness and Mandela effect stuff. I'm just like, okay, I guess I'll go with the flow. But like, this was not one of those times where I was like, let's just go with the flow. Cause I was like, you were upset. I was upset. It was not a good feeling. And yet it was a really important milestone that we both needed. And it was ultimately healing, I think, but like, it wasn't, it was probably the easiest it could have been in order to like heal some wounds, especially for you. But like, it wasn't easy. You know what I mean? Like it could have been a replay completely of like, you needed to be rescued and like all this stuff, but it wasn't like that. It was a milder version of it, but like, it was intense.
And you were so kind and compassionate, and you just like diffused the energy immediately, because I was like so scared that I was like, where the fuck are you? And you were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that must have been so scary. And then I was just like
Yeah.
that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And I was like, where? Just like, I was like, just give me a hug. And he was just like crying in your arms for a bit and stuff. And then it was like all good.
And maybe that's what needed to happen. Maybe like I was able to diffuse the energy so that it didn't become Mount Olympus part 2 or whatever the fuck, Mount Montreal part 2 or whatever. I don't know. It was like the universe definitely put us there together for a reason, and split the timelines for a reason. And like I said, it was really powerful, but it was draining as shit. So that like those were the kinds of days we had where like they weren't all like traumatic like that, but it was still like that trip was no chill. Like we did not.
We were
kept going.
exhausted every single night, like just so wiped. It was go, go, go.
Yeah.
And then the Frida, I wanted to talk about that too.
Yes.
Which also anyway, you were like, you were really kind during that trip. That was like the trip where I kept having meltdowns, because we had gone to the one Frida exhibit, and then we couldn't buy tickets online. That was like her place where she lived, like the standard place. And it kept playing Trickstery. And then finally I was like, maybe there's a reason. And then it was like, well, I keep seeing these billboards for this interactive Frida thing that was happening somewhere completely different. And then trying to find that was like really hard. I kept thinking we were at the right address and we weren't. And then we got there and it had said it was free everywhere online. And then it cost like whatever, it cost more than I was expecting. And I was like, I just kept like, but it's because, surprise, surprise, again, it was like a very triggering exhibit.
Super.
It was beautiful. It was set up in this big tall room and everything was projected on the walls and it was like all moving around. And then there was like a thing with tassels that would like part like curtains, and then stuff would come through, and there was like a sculptural part and it would just project all these beautiful paintings, but they were coming to life. And then there was like an audio part. But of course, it was like this things I already knew about Frida, but I hadn't been thinking about it that way. I was just thinking about it as like a cool woman artist to see. But of course, there was like so much physical pain and chronic health issues and like depression type mood instability stuff throughout her life. And then just on our way in, they were like, she had polio when she was young. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that. I was like, that's just like my grandmother on my mom's side who got polio, and then it created this heart murmur, which was eventually like it had a big impact on her life, and eventually that's what she died from. It's like stuff to do with that. And then they were like, and of course she had her leg amputated, and I was like, wait, what? Like I knew all these things, and I was like, I don't remember that part. And that was my grandmother on my father's side, my dad's mom, who she got breast cancer, and then it spread to her bones, and she ended up having to have her leg amputated at one point, and it caused like a big depression in her where she was suicidal, and then she eventually died. And I just like those two things, and I was just like, I just burst out weeping. I was just like, okay, I'm facing some stuff here.
I was crying. Yeah, I was definitely crying a lot too. And that was, yeah, there was big, strong energy in that exhibit. And I think it was even more important to go to that one than it was even to her regular house studio, whatever. Although I wanted to see it, obviously, but like, next time. But like, this was talk about really diving in the immersion of it. It was a very cool exhibit. And it
was so beautiful. And it was like, there were ones where there were like butterflies flying through. Yeah. So it was like very magical and like surreal and stuff. There would like be a painting of her and then all these butterflies. It was beautifully done. Yeah. But yeah, it was like, okay.
It was intense as shit the whole day.
Well, it's just, of course, anybody would be like triggered by that exhibit. It was just, there's so much that's like very dense and like moving about her journey and her life. And like, woo.
Yeah, it was a lot. We definitely cleared out a lot of shit with the help of all of the things that we came across. Like, couldn't have done that without Frida, and couldn't have done that without other beautiful sinks that just came into our awareness, that we were just like, okay, it looks like we're doing this now. And we had the support of like all this incredible, both masculine and feminine energy. I felt more feminine energy, but I didn't not feel masculine energy. It was really a pretty integrative trip, I think.
Yeah, because that was the day we were supposed to leave Mexico and go to Toluca, but our host was like, you could check out anytime. So that's what allowed us to go on that walk for the interactive exhibit. Was we had all the time in the world to leave. We didn't have to check out in the morning. So
Yeah.
we were just at our own pace and that. So it was like, no, you're gonna see this and feel this.
Yeah.
You
But-
little squirmy asshole trying to squirm away from your feelings about the physical body and its decay and vulnerability.
Yeah, the fear was pretty strong, the decay, but it was, I think like when you got back and that billboard outside of your apartment that always gives you messages about where you were, like that saying, what is it? Not far to
Yes.
go or something like that.
Friggin' yes. The billboard since the beginning of my awakening has constantly been giving me like periodically it'll change and give me a new update about what phase I'm in. So at early in 2022, it switched to a billboard for that fucking Tiger King movie that they made out of the documentary or about whatever. And so it's like a man and a woman with a gun between them and then a tiger on it. So it was like extremely like, yes, 2022, the year of the tiger, year of integration, dark masculine, dark feminine. And it's been haunting me for so long. I'm like, am I not done with this fucking dark masculine, dark feminine?
Well, then this trip with the huge integration of the masculine and feminine, like all through Mexico, and obviously you had more of it in the cave and all that other stuff that you've been doing. But like when we got back from this fucking trip, it was like, hey, not far to go. Look what you literally transmuted all this shit.
We got back and I was like, if that poster is still there, it was like girding my loins. I was like, it's okay. It just means there's a little longer. Don't get it. It's been months now that I just seeing it triggers me because I'm like, I can't get out of this. And it's not also like it's like a really grim documentary that I didn't watch, but I didn't even want to hear people talk about. It's like, oh, so I was just like, also it's just like this stupid movie that nobody cared about. I'm like, there's no reason for this fucking poster to still be. It's like give me anything else. And then I went out the next morning because I got back really late and I didn't notice. And I ran out the next morning and I was like, oh my God, not far to go.
Well, I think that we have cleared, and by we, I mean, not just you and I, but like, I think quite a few people in the spiritual community, or even the people who are not awake, the people who've been doing the work, I think we've cleared more than we thought we were going to be able to do in this lifetime. It feels that big to me. I don't know
I
how
agree.
to describe it, but like, I think we cleared beyond what our maybe soul contracts or the plan originally was or whatever. And so it's kind of like we've dropped off the first phase of our, like we came here to drop off light codes or clear the grid or like whatever it is, and that work is not done, but like we needed to sort of wrap that up with a bow of sorts, like integrating all this stuff in ourselves and initiations and all the things that we've been through. And we just like blasted through beyond any expectations I think that we held, which is why all these timeline things are so crazy right now, because like we've been collapsing so many outdated ones that like I think the universe needed a minute to like readjust to everybody's progress, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving us too much of a superhero status, but that's what it feels like to me. It feels like we just dropped off so much. And then this next phase, like this not far to go phase, it's like, now you just be, like genuinely you get to be the security, all the stuff that we've been transmuting, the security and the fear and like all this crap. It's like you literally get to have your personal Eden on earth, and it's literally not that far away. Like,
well, coming out of this experience, I am like very much like I need to have a very important talk with myself and really meditate on boundaries around macroing, because I don't feel like I think macroing, ultimately everything is just like benefits. Oh my God, I'm looking at the clouds and there's like a huge hole.
like a portal.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This is coming to me now as I'm saying it. I don't think you're supposed to macro forever. And I think the macroing, like it does have benefits for the collective, but everything is interchangeable, and the benefits for the collective are the benefits for the self. So it's all like good.
I think that we're done with that. Like, you're right. I think we need to have the conversations with our higher selves or whatever, but like, I think that we're done with that. Like, this is basically the final like what we agreed to do, we fucking did it and then some. And so it's just like we're energetically passing off other macroing stuff maybe to other people, or whatever. There's just different waves of awakening, and we went through our macroing stuff. It was probably longer than
that's what it feels like to me. It's a bit like, because it's like a boundaries, it's like you're just like, it's like at a certain point I need to do, if I want to tap into collective or whatever, it's like find ways that are more intentional and feel safer, that aren't just constantly messing with my nervous system.
Exactly. And that's what I
just
think.
Like willy-nilly, it's like, oh, now this energy is like coming online, so it's gonna like blast through my body and psyche in a completely unstructured way.
I think the bite of the cookie that we all took, I think of it as a cookie because that is just a way to lighten the fucking mood for me, because this has been such a shitty past few years. But like the bite of the collective trauma cookie that we took on, I think we've passed it through our systems for the most part. And this next phase is just us doing it in that way that you were talking about, where it's a little more intentional and it doesn't take the piss out of our nervous system kind of shit. It's going to be calmer and a lot more easy. More easy. I can't even talk, whatever, what I mean.
Because you also need people to start who are already doing it, but you need more and more people to like start setting that example in themselves of like bringing in less high contrast in their life, of like mega high or like mega lows, at least. Like lows of like evening out, so that we can get used to the existence that we're moving towards, which is way less supercharged in that way of like just like crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis.
Yeah, I hear that. And I'm so ready for it because I am tired. We took the brunt of it. And now
I always think I'm ready for it. And then when I'm faced with stepping off that wheel, I feel how that part of me is like attracted and also like very tired and like completely, and it's like too much, but like just like used to it and like habitual and like, what is life if it's not that? So we're navigating some interesting stuff going forward, but like I just don't think it's going to be that hard. And maybe that's me in my flow of, timeline shifts. That's another one happened. Okay. Like, I don't know, the stuff that doesn't faze me as much. Maybe that's that talking, but like also then that's why I'm here for you and any other people who need some sort of an anchor, as much as that really is an anchor. I feel like none of us can anchor into anything right now, but like just the stabilizing presence of just like, okay, cool. You've already brought a home into your life and a huge property with an ancestral forest into your life that's allowing you to leave this matrix job. Anyway, it's just like you're already doing that. I find it very, very, very helpful to see you doing that and like being able to like tolerate and like tolerate to whatever degree you're able to, but like move through it and move towards it. And future episode, I do want to talk about other people and how the ways that people are doing this without having to be on like a crazy awakening journey, the ways that they're like just what you were saying before, like working through the trauma cookie and stuff. Because I think that's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, that was kind of a summary of Mexico. Wild trip. We also pooped a lot in Mexico.
Definitely lots of poop.
Oh my God, I had one of the best meals of my life, that breakfast at that cafe, which was just really
outstanding.
Yeah. Oh, Mexico, where they show up, you order your breakfast. So whatever you get, like it could be pancakes or it could be croque madame or whatever that already has like probably a bread component somewhere to it. And then they show up at your table with like a basket of pastries to like, that is so my jam. I am such a carb fiend. I was just like, excuse me, what? Like my inner Paddington Bear was just like, what?
Same. I was able to eat the bread too, which was so helpful, and drink the milk. I was like, oh, need to be living in a place where I can do this more. Well, not true. I don't want to give up America because I know that my place is here or whatever, but also it makes me just want to travel more because I can eat the gluten and the dairy stuff in other places, at least right now. But I'm aligning with the timeline where in America, we change our farming habits and we're aligning with the timeline where we can all eat our own gluten and dairy products and it's not a problem.
We had this huge stuffed plastic bag full of treats like chocolates and candies and cookies and chips that we were like hauling everywhere because we were like, it was definitely some like childhood like fantasy stuff we were playing. So yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded, but that's the dilly, and I'm very happy to feel this post terror dome re-energized place to be able to want to podcast.
Yeah. Now all that's left is to navigate some crazy fluid timelines, no big deal.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So tune in next time to see where that's at.
Yeah.
If you're having fluid timeline stuff happen in your life, please share.
Reach on out.
Share with us. All right. So long, everybody's.
So long.